Tonight, we're drifting high above quiet valleys and moonlit cliffs, to a place where the wind carries the wings of eagles across the night sky. In this peaceful sleep story, you'll discover 100 fascinating facts about cliffside eagle nests, the winds they ride, and the feathers that help them soar for miles without effort. But don't worry about remembering every detail. This story isn't meant to keep you awake. It's meant to help you slowly relax, unwind, and drift into deep sleep. So dim the lights, get comfortable, take a slow breath. And let's begin our quiet journey to the cliffs where the eagles rest. There is a place where the stone meets the sky, not gently, not gradually, but all at once, in a sheer and ancient declaration. A cliff face, sun-warmed and wind-scoured, rising from the valley floor like the spine of the earth itself. And here, on a ledge so narrow that a person could not stand on it without trembling, something extraordinary has been happening for longer than any of us can remember. An eagle has made its home. We tend to think of nests as small things, a cup of grass and mud tucked into a hedge, a fragile cradle swaying in the canopy. But a cliffside eagle nest is something else entirely. It is an architecture of patience, of instinct, of years. Bald and golden eagles build what are known as eyries, large, platform-style nests that they return to year after year, adding new sticks, new grasses, new layers with each passing season. Over the decades, a single nest can grow to weigh over a ton. Some recorded eyries have reached depths of nearly 4 meters, accumulating like geological strata, each layer a chapter in an ongoing story. This particular ledge has held its nest for what the local ranchers say is over 30 years. The sticks at the very bottom have long since turned dark and compressed, almost wooden in their density, locked together by weather and time. Toward the top, the newer additions are pale and springy, gathered in the weeks before the eggs were laid, woven in with dry grasses and the shed wool of mountain sheep. It is a living record, this nest. A diary written in branches. The morning light arrives here slowly. The cliff faces east, and the sun, when it finally crests the far ridge, falls across the stone in long horizontal bands, warming the rock by degrees. This matters more than it might seem. Cliffside nest sites are chosen with extraordinary precision. Eagles select locations that receive adequate solar exposure to keep eggs and young chicks warm, while also offering natural overhangs or recesses that provide shade during the hottest part of the day and shelter from rain and driving winds. What looks, to a passing hiker below, like a random perch is in fact the result of careful, repeated assessment. Eagles are known to survey potential nest sites across multiple seasons before committing to them. And it is not just the light they are reading. It is the wind. Wind is not a single thing on a cliff face, it is a constantly shifting architecture of invisible forces. The large-scale prevailing winds that sweep across the landscape are interrupted, channeled, and transformed the moment they encounter vertical stone. On the leeward side of a cliff, there are often powerful updrafts, columns of rising air created as the wind deflects upward along the rock face. Eagles understand this instinctively. They build on ledges where these updrafts are reliable and consistent, because rising air means effortless lift. It means leaving the nest and being carried aloft with barely a wing beat. For a bird that may weigh up to 7 kilograms and carry a wingspan stretching nearly 2.5 meters across, the ability to rise without exertion is not a luxury. It is survival arithmetic. The female is on the nest now. She has been there since before dawn, her dark body barely distinguishable from the rock itself in the early half-light. She is patient in a way that seems almost geological, settled, ancient, immovable. Beneath her, 2 eggs rest in the shallow central bowl of the nest, which she has lined with soft materials, feathers, moss, the dried inner bark of juniper. The eggs are large and pale, lightly spotted, and they hold within them a promise that will not be broken for another 30-some days. Eagle feathers are not merely for flight, they serve as sophisticated thermal regulators, and the way a brooding eagle uses them during incubation is a masterclass in insulation engineering. When a female settles over her eggs, she deliberately fluffs her breast and belly feathers, trapping a layer of warm air close to her skin. The feathers themselves are structured in a way that minimizes heat loss. The downy base layer, soft and interlocking, creates a near windproof buffer, while the outer contour feathers shed rain and deflect cold air. The eggs, held against a bare patch of skin on the female's belly called the brood patch, an area temporarily denuded of feathers and rich with blood vessels, receive warmth directly from her body. On a cold morning, with temperature swinging below freezing, this system maintains the eggs at a near constant 37 degrees Celsius. She shifts slightly, turning the eggs with a slow, deliberate roll of her body. This she will do many times throughout the day. The male arrives without fanfare. He simply appears, dropping from some higher thermal with his wings folded into a shallow stoop, then flaring them wide at the last moment to land on a protruding shelf of rock just above the nest. He carries something, a length of stick, freshly broken from a dead pine on the ridge above, and he holds it for a moment in his talons before leaning down to tuck it into the nest's outer wall. Then he straightens, looks out across the valley, and holds himself still in that particular way eagles have, as though they are not just resting but actively contemplating everything they survey. Male and female eagles engage in mutual nest building and maintenance throughout the breeding season, though the female typically takes the dominant role in arranging the nest interior. The addition of fresh green vegetation, small leafy branches, aromatic herbs like sagebrush, is thought to serve an antibacterial function, potentially reducing the parasite load within the nest. Some researchers have observed that eagles will specifically select plant species with insect-repelling properties, suggesting a level of medicinal awareness in their nest-tending behavior that is remarkable even among the most cognitively sophisticated birds. The male does not linger. After a few minutes, he turns into the updraft rising from the cliff face and is lifted away from the ledge in a single smooth arc, rising in a wide gyre above the canyon. To watch an eagle soar is to be given a brief lesson in the physics of air, whether you know it or not. The bird does not flap. Not once, not for what seems like impossibly long stretches of time. It simply leans into the invisible, and the invisible holds it. Soaring flight is made possible by 2 distinct types of rising air, thermals and ridge lift. Thermals are columns of warm air that rise from sun-heated ground, open fields, dark rock faces, south-facing slopes that absorb more solar radiation than their surroundings. Ridge lift, sometimes called orographic lift, is what our eagle is using now, the mechanical deflection of wind as it hits the cliff, forced upward and over the top. Where thermals are unpredictable, rising and collapsing with changes in cloud cover and ground temperature, ridge lift is comparatively consistent. As long as the wind blows into the cliff face at the right angle, the column of ascending air is there. Eagles know which cliffs provide it, remember their geography of the invisible wind. He rises in slow spirals, climbing higher with each lazy revolution until he is a dark comma against the pale sky, far above the nest ledge, far above the ridge. An eagle's wing is not a fixed surface, it is a dynamic, continuously reconfigured instrument. The primary feathers at the wingtip, long and finger-like, can be spread apart and individually angled, acting as separate aerofoils that reduce the wingtip vortex drag that would otherwise bleed energy at the edges of the wing. When soaring in thermals or ridge lift, an eagle spreads these primaries wide, maximizing the surface area available to catch rising air. When gliding at speed across flat air, it draws them slightly inward, reducing drag. The bird is always tuning itself, reading the air through the mechanoreceptors embedded at the base of each feather, making thousands of micro-adjustments every minute that never register as visible movement. It is a kind of continuous conversation with the atmosphere. Down on the nest, the female has not moved. The wind carries the distant whistle of the male, a thin, high sound, surprisingly reedy for so large a bird, and she does not acknowledge it, but she hears it. The valley below the cliff is waking up. Morning mist lies in the low places, pooled between the bends of the river, burning off slowly at its edges. The thermals will not develop in earnest for another hour or two, not until the sun is high enough and the rock and soil warm enough to begin pumping columns of heat into the still air. But up here on the cliff, the ridge lift is already working. The wind comes from the northwest today, steady, reliable, and where it hits the stone it folds upward and outward in a wave the eagles have known all their lives. Golden eagles, the species most associated with cliffside nesting in mountainous terrain, have home ranges that can span hundreds of square kilometers, yet they tend to follow highly consistent soar paths, returning to the same ridges, the same thermals, the same invisible highways through the sky, day after day and season after season. These routes are not random, they represent learned, refined knowledge of where the lift is most reliable, where the prey is most available, and where the crossings between one valley and the next require the least expenditure of energy. Young eagles learn these routes partly by following their parents during the post-fledgling period, and partly by exploration and trial, gradually building up an internal map of the aerial landscape that is as detailed and reliable as any human navigational chart. The eggs beneath the female will not hatch for another month. But the cliff has already begun its season. The lichens on the south-facing rocks are a deep, saturated orange in the morning light, the saxifrage is pushing tiny flowers up through cracks in the stone, and the first warmth of the year is reaching even into the shadowed recesses where the nest is anchored. Everything is in preparation. Everything is moving towards something. The structural integrity of a cliffside eyrie depends not just on the sticks themselves but on the way they interlock and on the rock features that anchor the base. Eagles preferentially select ledges with a back wall, a section of cliff that rises above the nest and provides both a windbreak and a structural support against which the rear of the nest can be pressed. The sticks at the base of the nest develop, over years of compression and weathering, into a dense mass that can lock itself into crevices in the rock, making the entire structure extraordinarily stable. Nests that have been documented for decades on the same ledge have survived violent storms, driving rain, and heavy snowfall that would dismantle any human-built structure of comparable weight and surface area. The ledge holds. It has always held. And so the morning deepens. The shadows shorten and pull back from the cliff face. The female adjusts her weight on the eggs, barely perceptibly, a slight leaning into the warmth of the stone behind her. High above, the male has found the first good thermal of the day, a rising column anchored to a dark patch of south-facing granite on the far side of the valley, and he tilts into it, beginning his long, patient ascent. Eagles do not simply soar for pleasure. Every thermal used, every ridge lift exploited, every effortless glide across the valley represents energy conserved for hunting, for nest building, for the enormous metabolic cost of producing and raising young. Studies measuring the energy expenditure of large raptors during soaring flight have found that the caloric cost is only marginally higher than perching. By contrast, powered flapping flight burns energy at many times that rate. The geography of wind, the timing of thermals, the knowledge of which cliff faces and which valleys produce lift at which hours of the day, all of this constitutes a kind of accumulated intelligence, held in the body and the memory of the bird, refined over a lifetime. To watch an eagle soar is not to watch something effortless. It is to watch the result of everything it has ever learned about the sky. The male is a speck now, barely visible. He has been gone for 20 minutes. He will be gone for hours more. And the female waits, as she has always waited, as the cliff holds her, as the wind keeps rising. Time moves differently on a cliff. Down in the valley, the days have a rhythm marked by human things, the morning commute, the school bell, the amber glow of kitchen windows at dusk. But up here, on the ledge, time is measured in other increments. The slow arc of shadow across the rock face. The shift of the wind from northwest to west as the afternoon builds. The almost imperceptible way the eggs beneath the female have grown warmer over the past 3 weeks, as the embryos within them generate a small but measurable heat of their own. She has not left the nest for more than a few hours at a stretch. When she does rise, when the male returns and takes his turn on the eggs, settling over them with a careful, deliberate lowering of his body, she does not go far. She bathes in the narrow creek that threads the canyon floor, spreads her wings in the sun to dry, and hunts along the eastern meadow where the ground squirrels are active in the warm part of the day. Then she returns, and the male lifts away, and the rhythm of the ledge continues. The wind today is gentle. It barely stirs the dried grasses woven into the nest's inner wall. But even a gentle wind, on a cliff face, is doing something. It is always doing something. The female is preening now, in the late morning warmth. The male has the eggs. She sits on her perched shelf above the nest, working methodically through the feathers of her left wing, starting at the base and moving toward the tip, drawing each feather through her bill with slow, deliberate strokes. She has approximately 7,000 feathers in total, fewer than many smaller birds, which compensate for their lower insulating mass with proportionally higher feather counts, and a significant number of them require daily attention. What most people never consider is that the air above a canyon is not the same air that fills the canyon itself. The two zones are separated by invisible boundaries, layers of differing temperature and moisture that the eagles navigate the way a sailor reads the surface of the sea, not by thinking about it, but by feeling it, by the constant feedback of pressure and turbulence against every surface of the body. When an eagle descends from the upper sky into the canyon, it is crossing through these layers. Its wings adjust automatically. The alula, a small group of feathers on the leading edge of the wing that functions like the slat on an aircraft's wing, lifts slightly to maintain airflow over the upper surface and prevent stalling at low speeds. The tail fans wide, becoming a brake and a rudder simultaneously. What looks from below like a graceful, unhurried descent is in fact a continuous series of rapid aerodynamic corrections, happening faster than conscious thought. Eagles possess a density of mechanoreceptors, pressure-sensitive nerve endings, at the base of their feathers that is significantly higher than in most other birds. This gives them something close to a tactile map of the air around them. A subtle change in pressure on the leading edge of the wing, a slight vibration in a particular primary feather, and the bird knows the air is about to change before the change arrives. It is, in every meaningful sense, feeling the wind. The eggs are now in their 4th week. Deep inside the pale shells, the embryos have become recognizable, the broad, dark eyes too large for the face, the stubby beginnings of wings folded against the body, the tiny curved beak already hardened enough to do what it must soon do. At the tip of that beak is a small, sharp protrusion called the egg tooth, a temporary structure made of keratin, the same material as feathers, talons, and the outer sheath of the beak itself, that exists for one purpose and one purpose only. Keratin is the quiet marvel running through almost everything that makes an eagle an eagle. Its feathers are built from it, each one a structure of almost unbelievable complexity, with a central shaft called the rachis, from which branch the barbs, and from those barbs the barbules, and from those barbules tiny hook-like structures called barbicels that interlock with the neighboring barbules to create a surface that is simultaneously flexible, strong, and nearly waterproof. When a feather becomes disheveled, when the barbicels separate, leaving gaps that would compromise aerodynamic performance, the eagle draws the feather through its bill in a process called preening, re-engaging the barbicels like closing a zip. The integrity of every flight feather is maintained this way, daily, sometimes for hours at a stretch. A feather in poor condition is not merely an aesthetic concern. It is a survival concern. Near the base of her tail, she pauses and reaches toward the uropygial gland, the preen gland, a small oil-secreting structure located just above the tail. She collects a small amount of the waxy, yellowish secretion on her bill and distributes it across the feathers as she works. This oil is not simply a waterproofing agent, though it does perform that function. Research has suggested it also contains compounds that inhibit the growth of feather-degrading bacteria, and that it may play a role in the control of feather lice, which can cause significant damage to flight feathers if left unchecked. The daily ritual of preening, then, is not vanity. It is maintenance of the most critical equipment the bird possesses. The wind picks up in the early afternoon. It comes from a new direction now, swinging around from the west, and the effect on the cliff face is immediate. The updraft shifts, eddies slightly, then stabilizes in a new configuration. The male, who has been sitting quietly on the eggs, raises his head and reads the air with something that looks almost like satisfaction. There is a concept in raptor biology called the power curve, the relationship between an eagle's airspeed and the energy it requires to maintain that speed. At very low speeds, lift drops and the bird must work hard to stay aloft. At very high speeds, drag increases and again the bird must work hard. But in the middle range, the sweet spot, an eagle can travel at speed for almost nothing, riding the slope of the curve where lift and drag balance beautifully and the wind does the work. The ideal soaring speed for a large eagle is roughly 50 to 60 km per hour, and in a good ridge lift with the right wind angle, it can travel at this speed, covering enormous distances, at a metabolic cost barely above resting. Eagles have been tracked, using modern GPS telemetry, covering over 200 kilometers in a single day without landing, riding one thermal into the next, crossing mountain ranges and river valleys on a thread of rising air that most of us would never know was there. Down in the nest, beneath the male's warm body, the eggs are very close now. The embryo in the larger egg has begun what is called internal pipping. It has broken through the inner membrane of the egg and drawn its first breath from the air cell at the blunt end of the shell. It is breathing, though still enclosed. The egg tooth is in position. The muscles of the neck have already begun their slow, exhausting work. Hatching for a large raptor is not a quick event. It can take up to 72 hours from the first crack of the shell, called external pipping, to the moment the chick fully emerges. During this time, the chick rotates slowly inside the shell, using the egg tooth to score a groove around the blunt end, pressing outward in increments, resting between efforts. The parents do not assist. They cannot. The exertion of hatching is itself a form of preparation. The muscles strengthened by the struggle are the same muscles the bird will use, in a few weeks' time, to pull itself upright on the ledge and face the wind. The male hears it first. A faint sound, barely distinguishable from the creak of the nest settling in the wind, a small, persistent tapping from beneath him. He does not move, but something changes in the quality of his stillness. He lowers his head, angling it sideways to bring one large amber eye close to the surface of the egg. He holds this position for a long moment, listening. Up on her perch, the female has stopped preening. She is watching him. The cliff holds everything in its ordinary afternoon: the wind, the light moving on the stone, the distant sound of the creek far below, the shadow of a passing cloud briefly dimming the warm colors of the rock face. And beneath the male's careful body, something is beginning that will take until tomorrow to complete, a small darkness pressing against its shell, making itself known to the world for the first time. The season has shifted. Something is coming through. It arrived in the pale hours before dawn. Not with drama, not with the kind of moment that announces itself, just a small, wet, exhausted thing, pressing through the last of its shell with the blind, total commitment of something that has never known anything but the need to move forward. By the time the morning light reached the ledge, the first chick was already dry enough to lift its head, and the second egg, still sealed, still tapping, rocked faintly in the bowl of the nest as the embryo within continued its long, slow work. The female had returned in the night, taking the eggs from the male without ceremony, lowering herself carefully over both, the chick and the egg, her body wide enough and warm enough to hold them both in the same envelope of heat. This is a critical and delicate time. The newly hatched chick is called a nestling, or sometimes an eaglet, and in these first hours it is almost absurdly vulnerable, wet, barely able to hold its own head up, its eyes half open and unfocused, its covering of pale gray natal down not yet fully dried and fluffed into the insulating layer it will need to maintain its own temperature. The wind moves past the ledge in long, soft pulses. The rock is still cold. The sun is not yet up. And the female holds everything together with the simple, ancient warmth of her body. The down that covers a newly hatched eagle is not the same down that will cover it in 2 weeks, nor anything like the feathers that will eventually carry it into the sky. It is natal down, the first coat, and it is a provisional thing, a placeholder. Thin individual fibers radiate outward from a tiny central point, with no barbicels to interlock them, no structure beyond the simplest branching. It traps air, and trapped air is warmth, but it does this only moderately well. It is enough for now, while the parents are always close. It will be replaced. What replaces it, the second down, which begins growing in beneath the natal coat within the first week or two, is denser, more structured, more efficient. And beneath that, already forming in the follicles of the skin before the eaglet is even a month old, are the first pin feathers, the true contour feathers, growing encased in a keratin sheath supplied with blood, visible as dark quills pushing up through the down in neat rows along the wing and back. These sheaths, called blood feathers, are sensitive, pressing on them causes pain, and the developing eaglet is instinctively careful about them, avoiding contact with the nest walls when it can. The feather is not merely grown. It is manufactured, follicle by follicle, at metabolic cost that is surprisingly high. Growing a full set of flight feathers requires significant protein, which is why the hunting demands on the parents escalate sharply once the chicks begin their rapid growth phase. The male is hunting now. He left the ledge as the sun cleared the eastern ridge, catching the first ridge lift of the morning and angling north along the cliff face, where the wind holds steady and the lift is consistent. He has a route, a long arc through the territories he knows, along the ridgeline and down into the broad sweep of the upper meadow where the river bends and the vegetation is thick enough to hold prey but open enough to see it from above. Eagles hunt primarily through a combination of soaring surveillance and directed stoops. From altitude, with their extraordinary eyesight, they scan the ground below in systematic passes, searching for movement, for the brief flash of a running animal, for the telltale disruption in the grass that means something is there. An eagle's eye is structured very differently from a human eye. It contains two foveas, two areas of maximum visual acuity, where the human eye has only one. This gives the bird the ability to focus with extreme sharpness on something directly ahead while simultaneously maintaining sharp peripheral vision to the side. The density of photoreceptors in an eagle's retina is roughly 5 times greater than in a human retina, meaning they can resolve fine detail at distances that would appear as a blur to us. What the male sees, from 300 meters above the meadow, is a world of extraordinary clarity and motion. He sees the grass moving in the wind and distinguishes it from the grass moving because something is running through it. He folds. One moment he is a wide, dark cross against the blue, barely moving, and then, in a transition so fast it is almost a cut, the way a film jumps between frames, his wings are pressed close to his body and he is falling. Not chaotically, not helplessly, but with controlled precision, angling his descent, making micro-adjustments with his tail and the position of his half-folded wings to track a target that is moving, that is aware of him now, that is running. The stoop of a hunting eagle is not the nearly vertical plunge of a peregrine falcon, it is a shallower, more angled dive, better suited to hitting targets on the ground and intercepting prey in open air. But it is still blindingly fast at its peak, and the kinetic energy it delivers through those talons, large, deeply curved, driven by legs with the grip strength to exert hundreds of kilograms of pressure per square centimeter, is enough to kill instantly. Today, it ends cleanly in the long grass near the river bend. The male mantles his wings over the catch for a moment, a reflex posture, shielding it from any rival that might be watching, then begins the work of carrying it back to the ledge. Carrying prey in flight is its own aerodynamic challenge, one that changes the entire performance envelope of the bird. Extra weight lowers the optimal soaring speed, reduces climb rate in thermals, and demands more from the wings on every stroke. Eagles are capable of carrying prey up to roughly half their own body weight in sustained flight, though they have been documented briefly lifting heavier animals in short bursts. The return journey to the nest is always heavier, always slower, and the male navigates it with the pragmatic efficiency of long experience, choosing routes that pass over reliable updrafts, avoiding the flat, still air of the valley bottom where powered flapping would be unavoidable, staying high as long as possible before the final descent to the ledge. He arrives and lands without elegance, prey clutched in one foot, the other foot taking the shock of landing on the edge of the nest. The female rises from the chick, now blinking, turning its oversized head toward the movement and the smell, and steps to the edge to feed. The male moves to stand over the eaglet, warming it while she tears small pieces, delicate and precise, for the nestling. The second egg hatches at midday. It is a quieter hatching than the first, less attended, in a sense, because the attention of the nest has already shifted toward the living chick. But the female notes it, repositions herself, and now two small gray heads move beneath her, lifting and falling with the slow rhythm of new breath. Two chicks on a cliff ledge will not necessarily both survive to fledge. This is known, in ecological terms, as the Cain and Abel dynamic, a name drawn from the biblical story, and one that is accurate in its bluntness. The elder chick, larger and stronger from even the small head start of a day or two, will compete aggressively for food, and in lean years, when prey is scarce and the parent's hunting is less productive, the younger chick may not receive enough to sustain itself. This is not cruelty in any meaningful sense. It is a biological hedge. 2 eggs increase the chance that at least one chick survives. The hierarchy between them is established almost immediately, maintained through persistent, low-level aggression, and the outcome is determined not by the parents but by the weather, the prey, and the wind. The wind today has changed again. It comes now from the southwest, warmer and moister than the morning air, carrying with it the faint smell of rain from somewhere over the distant ranges. On the cliff face, the updraft that the wind creates is different from the sharp, mechanical ridge lift of the colder northwest wind. This air is already slightly buoyant, warmer than the surrounding atmosphere, wanting to rise. It blends with the mechanical deflection of the cliff to create a layered, complex lift zone, richer and more variable than the morning's clean column. The atmosphere above a cliff during a wind shift is a dynamic environment of competing pressure zones, shear layers where 2 air masses of different speeds or directions slide past each other, and small-scale turbulence that appears and disappears within seconds. For a soaring bird, wind shear, the rapid change of wind speed or direction across a short vertical distance, can be both dangerous and useful. Dangerous if it causes sudden loss of lift at the wrong moment. Useful if it can be read and exploited, the way a surfer rides the energy contained in the shape of a wave rather than fighting it. Eagles, through years of experience over the same terrain, become intimately familiar with the wind shear patterns of their particular cliff faces and canyons. They know which combinations of wind direction and speed produce the dangerous conditions and which produce the exploitable ones. They know when to stay close to the rock and when to push wide into the valley air. This knowledge is not instinct. It is learned. It is, in the truest sense, wisdom, accumulated through thousands of flights over the same invisible landscape. The rain, when it comes, arrives as a gray curtain moving slowly up the valley, dimming the colors of the stone, settling the dust on the ledge. The female tucks her wings tighter and lowers her head, and the 2 small chicks disappear entirely beneath her, safe and warm, while the world outside the nest becomes water and wind and the low, even sound of rainfall on ancient rock. The cliff holds. The nest holds. And inside it, 2 small lives breathe on, unhurried and unknowing, into the gray afternoon. Three weeks have passed since the hatching, and the ledge is a different place. Where there was once the quiet, held-breath stillness of incubation, the female motionless, the eggs silent, the whole nest existing in a kind of suspension, there is now movement, demand, noise. The eaglets have tripled in size. Their second down, the denser, more structured coat, has filled out into a thick gray-white covering that makes them look, from a distance, like 2 small clouds that have somehow settled onto the rock. Their legs, disproportionately large, push them upright in lurching, unsteady attempts at standing. Their beaks, already darkening toward the black they will eventually become, open wide whenever a parent arrives, and the sound that comes out of them is not the noble cry most people associate with eagles. It is a thin, urgent, almost pitiable squealing, the sound of pure appetite. The elder chick is noticeably larger. Not by a dramatic margin, perhaps a fifth bigger across the body, the legs slightly heavier, the head slightly broader, but in the compressed economy of a nest, a fifth is everything. It reaches the food first. It positions itself between the younger chick and the arriving parent with an unconscious, instinctive persistence that requires no thought and leaves no room for sentiment. The younger chick waits, and eats what remains, and so far it has been enough. This year, the hunting has been good. The parent's hunting rhythm has adapted entirely to the demands of the nest. In the weeks before hatching, they hunted to sustain themselves. Now they hunt for 3, and soon, as the chick's growth rate accelerates into its steepest phase, the caloric requirements of the nest will peak at a level that keeps both adults in the air for the better part of each day. The female, larger than the male, as is typical across nearly all raptor species, a phenomenon known as reverse sexual dimorphism, takes the larger prey. Female golden eagles can weigh up to 7 kilograms, with a wingspan approaching 2.5 meters, and they are capable of hunting animals considerably larger than the rabbits and ground squirrels that form the staple diet. Jackrabbits, young foxes, small deer fawns in season, these are within range for a large female in good condition. The male, lighter and more agile, tends toward faster, more maneuverable prey, birds taken in the air, smaller mammals, the occasional snake. Their hunting styles are complementary, and together they cover a broader range of prey than either could manage alone. This division of labor is not rigid or assigned, it emerges from the physical realities of their different sizes and the aerodynamic consequences that flow from them. A heavier bird turns more slowly, climbs more gradually, but delivers more force on impact. A lighter bird accelerates faster, corners more tightly, but cannot overpower large prey. Evolution has built these differences in, and the pair exploits them without negotiation, without hierarchy, simply by being what they are. The male returns in the late morning with a jackrabbit, and the feeding that follows is careful, almost surgical. The female tears strips of meat with her beak, not roughly, not with the full force she would use dismembering prey for herself, but with a precision that produces pieces small enough for the nestlings to swallow. Eagle chicks at this age cannot yet tear their own food. Their beaks are hardening but their neck muscles are still developing, and the act of feeding them is one of the more unexpectedly tender behaviors in a bird that the human imagination tends to cast in an exclusively fierce light. Between feedings, the chicks sleep in sudden, absolute collapses, standing one moment, deeply unconscious the next, their heads drooping forward onto the soft material of the nest floor. Sleep at this stage is not rest in the adult sense. It is construction. The majority of the growth hormone that drives their extraordinary rate of development, golden eagle chicks can gain more than 100 grams per day during the peak growth phase, is released during sleep, and the body uses these hours of stillness to build bone, muscle, and the follicular infrastructure that will soon begin producing feathers in earnest. Bone growth in a young eagle is particularly rapid and requires a carefully balanced intake of calcium, phosphorus, and vitamin D. The bones themselves are not solid, they are pneumatized, meaning they are hollow and connected to the bird's respiratory system, filled with extensions of the air sacs that run through the eagle's body. This is not a weakness. Pneumatized bones are, weight for weight, as strong as solid bones, and their lightness is essential to flight. But they must be grown correctly, with adequate nutrition at the right time, or the consequences, skeletal deformities, fragile shafts prone to fracture, can be permanent. The wind today is from the north, cold and direct, and it hits the cliff face squarely, producing the cleanest ridge lift of the season. The female, who has been spending more time off the nest as the chicks grow better able to thermoregulate themselves, has been in the air for 2 hours. She is not hunting. She is simply flying, moving along the cliff face in long, effortless traverses, rising and descending in the lift column, occasionally angling out over the valley to catch a thermal and spiral upward before returning to the ridge. There is something that looks, from below, like pleasure in this. Whether eagles experience anything analogous to what humans would call enjoyment is a question that science approaches carefully, but what is clear is that flight is not merely a means of getting from one place to another. Eagles in good condition, with full crops and no immediate hunting demands, spend significant time in the air doing what appears to be nothing more than flying. They test the conditions, explore the edges of thermals, ride the shear layers between wind zones. One thing that emerges clearly from this kind of flight is the extraordinary sensitivity of an eagle's vestibular system, the inner ear structures that detect motion and maintain balance and spatial orientation. Eagles can detect and correct for rotational forces, sudden gusts, and asymmetric lift, the slight difference in airflow between the two wings that occurs when one side enters a thermal before the other, with a speed and precision that no human-built aircraft autopilot has yet matched. The body is always working, always correcting, always in conversation with the air. Back on the ledge, the elder chick is standing at the nest's edge. Not venturing beyond it, there is no beyond it, not yet, not safely, but standing there with its face into the wind, its nascent wing stubs half extended, feeling something it has no context for yet. The wind presses against the flat of its body, ruffles the deep down, and the chick leans into it almost imperceptibly, the way a sail leans into the pressure that will eventually move it. This behavior, standing at the nest edge facing the wind, extending the developing wings, is the beginning of what ornithologists call wingersizing. Over the coming weeks, as the pin feathers break their sheaths and the true flight feathers emerge and lengthen, the chick will spend increasing amounts of time in this posture, flapping with growing strength and coordination, occasionally lifting its feet from the nest floor for a fraction of a second, unintentionally at first, then with increasing awareness of what it is doing. The muscles of the breast, the pectoralis major that will eventually power sustained flapping flight, are being built through this exercise, fiber by fiber, in exactly the same way that a human athlete builds muscle through progressive loading. The wing, at this stage, is not yet a wing in any functional sense. It is a promise. A blueprint being assembled in real time, feather by feather, muscle fiber by muscle fiber, in the wind and the light of the cliff face that has been home to this family for 30 years. The younger chick watches its sibling from across the nest. It is not yet ready to stand at the edge, its legs are less steady, its confidence less absolute, but it watches with those large, amber-brown eyes that are already beginning to show the remarkable acuity they will one day possess. For now, it sees the world in a limited way, its visual system still maturing, the full range of its eventual perceptual capabilities weeks away from coming online. Below the ledge, the valley is green and busy with the full momentum of the season. The river runs high and cold with snowmelt. The meadows are thick. The thermals rising from the dark soil of the open fields are strong and reliable now, the mid-season sun powering them through the long afternoon hours, and the sky above the canyon is rarely empty. There are ravens working the cliff face lower down, a pair of red-tailed hawks coursing the meadow edge, and occasionally the distant silhouette of another eagle, a young bird, a floater without territory, keeping a respectful distance from the ridge where the resident pair have made their life. The cliff holds its family close. 6 weeks out from hatching, and the nest has been transformed by feathers. They have been arriving for the past 2 weeks in a slow, steady emergence, dark quills breaking through the fading down, sheaths splitting to release the folded vein within, each feather unfurling over the course of days into the shape it will hold for the next year. The gray-white of the natal coat is being replaced, panel by panel, with the dark brown of juvenile plumage, and the eaglets are beginning to look like what they are becoming rather than what they have been. The elder chick is winger-sizing with real intent now. What began as a reflexive leaning into the wind has evolved into something more deliberate, long sessions of sustained flapping at the nest edge, the broad brown wings catching the updraft and generating lift that the chick is clearly registering, its feet lightening against the nest floor, its body rising fractionally and then settling back as the flapping slows. It is learning the relationship between effort and air, between the movement of its own muscles and the response of the invisible medium it will one day inhabit completely. Every session is stronger than the last. Every session reshapes the breast muscle a little further. Below the ledge, the valley is deep in the fullness of summer. The thermals are at their most powerful now, tall, wide columns of rising air that can carry a soaring bird to altitudes of 3,000 meters or more above the terrain, high enough that the cliff itself becomes a small feature in a vast landscape of ridges and rivers and the long, pale geometry of the canyon system stretching away to the south. At altitude, the air is different. Thinner, colder, and moving in ways that have nothing to do with the local topography of cliff faces and canyon walls. At 3,000 meters above the terrain, an eagle is operating in the free atmosphere, where the large-scale pressure systems that drive regional weather begin to assert themselves, the broad, slow rivers of air that meteorologists track on their charts, moving in patterns that span entire continents. Eagles do not reach these altitudes casually or frequently. But during migration, or during the wide-ranging territorial flights of late summer when the season's demands begin to ease, large raptors will climb into the upper reaches of the convective boundary layer, the zone of the atmosphere actively stirred by surface heating, and ride the conditions there. At these heights, the view is extraordinary in ways that matter practically rather than aesthetically. From 3,000 meters, with their resolving power, eagles can survey an area of terrain that would take a human on foot several days to cross. They are reading the landscape for future reference as much as for immediate hunting, noting the burns where new growth will attract prey next season, the water sources that concentrate animals in dry years, the corridors between ridges that funnel movement. Migration in eagles is not the rigid, genetically programmed journey of many songbirds. Golden eagles in particular show a flexible, experience-modulated migration strategy. Younger birds tend to migrate earlier and travel further, while established adults with good territories may migrate shorter distances or not at all in mild years. The decision of when to leave, which route to take, and how far to go appears to be made individually, updated in real time based on weather conditions, prey availability, and the bird's own body condition. Back on the cliff, the female has begun to shift her behavior in a way that seems, at first, almost like neglect. She is spending less time on the nest, arriving with food and departing again quickly rather than settling in to brood and watch. When she does stand on the nest edge, she sometimes holds prey just out of the chick's reach, not offering it, not pulling it away, simply holding it at a distance that requires the chicks to stretch and lunge and work for what they want. This is deliberate. It is the beginning of the weaning process, not from milk, as in mammals, but from the passive receipt of food. The chicks must begin to associate effort with eating, must begin to develop the coordination and the assertiveness that hunting will eventually require. The female is not withholding food cruelly. She is recalibrating the dynamic of the nest, pushing the chicks toward a posture of agency that they will need within weeks. The chicks respond to this shift with increasing animation. They move around the nest more purposefully, investigate its edges with greater boldness, and have begun, tentatively, to tear at pieces of prey left on the nest floor rather than waiting for it to be presented to them. The elder chick, reaching down to grip a strip of meat with its talons and pull against it with its beak, is performing for the first time, clumsily, incompletely, but unmistakably, the motion sequence that will one day be the first act after every successful hunt. The talons doing that gripping are worth pausing on. They are not simply claws in the way that word implies something incidental or decorative. They are precision instruments, each one a recurved spike of keratin over a core of bone, attached to a toe whose tendons run up through the leg in a mechanical arrangement that causes the foot to grip tighter automatically as the leg flexes, meaning that an eagle that has closed its foot around prey cannot easily open it again without deliberately extending the leg. This ratchet-like tendon lock is why eagles can carry prey over long distances without muscular fatigue in the foot. The grip is maintained passively, by the geometry of the system rather than by continuous muscular contraction. The hallux talon, the rear-facing talon on the inner toe, the killing talon, is the longest and most deeply curved. In a large female golden eagle it can be nearly 6 centimeters long, and it is the talon that is driven into the prey on impact, penetrating to vital structures with the force of the stoop behind it. The front talons grip and hold. The hallux penetrates and ends. The whole system works in a fraction of a second, and the eagle is usually carrying its prey skyward before the prey's nervous system has fully registered what has happened. The wind shifts in the early afternoon, swinging southwest, and with it comes a change in the quality of the light. The sky takes on a slightly brassy tint that experienced eyes, human or avian, read as the signature of a large pressure system moving through. The thermals, which have been clean and well-defined through the morning, begin to broaden and flatten as the atmosphere destabilizes slightly ahead of the system. Broad, flat thermals are harder to core, harder to find the tight center of rising air where the lift is strongest, and the male, returning from a long hunting circuit to the north, takes longer than usual to climb back to the nest elevation, working the edges of several thermals before finding one strong enough to carry him in. Thermal structure is more complex than it appears from the ground. A well-developed thermal is not a simple column but a roughly toroidal, donut-shaped, circulation, with air rising strongly in the center, spreading outward at the top, then descending around the outside before being drawn back in at the base. An eagle circling in a thermal is threading the rising core of this circulation, adjusting its bank angle and airspeed to stay within the strongest lift. Too tight a circle and it risks stalling on the inside wing. Too wide and it drifts into the sinking air at the column's edge. The optimal circle diameter for a large eagle in a typical thermal is roughly 80 to 100 meters, tight enough to stay in the core, wide enough to maintain flying speed on both wings. A bird that has spent years over the same terrain develops an intuitive feel for where the thermals form and how they behave at different times of day and in different wind conditions. Dark surfaces, bare rock, plowed fields, south-facing slopes, heat faster and produce thermals earlier. Wet surfaces, lakes, irrigated fields, dense forest, suppress thermal formation. The eagle carries this thermal map internally, updating it continuously with each flight. Evening settles over the cliff in its slow, layered way, the shadows rising from the canyon floor, the sunlight retreating up the rock face, the colors intensifying briefly into amber and rust before the light thins and the cliff goes gray. The chicks are settled in the nest, their new feathers dark against the fading light. The female is on her perch shelf, facing into the last of the evening wind. Tomorrow the elder chick will, for the first time, leave the ground. Not by intention, not with any understanding of what is happening, simply because the wind will be right, the wings will be moving, and for one vertiginous, clarifying moment, nothing will be beneath its feet. It will land back on the nest almost immediately, its heart hammering in some bird equivalent of shock and discovery. But it will have been in the air. And nothing, after that first moment, is ever quite the same. The cliff holds the last of the light. The wind moves through without stopping. The nest sits in its 30-year groove in the rock, patient as the stone itself, waiting for tomorrow. It happens just after 9 in the morning, when the ridge lift is already running clean and the wind is holding steady from the northwest at a speed that presses firmly but not violently against the cliff face. The elder chick has been at the nest edge for 20 minutes, wingersizing with a focus and intensity that is different from previous sessions, longer strokes, fuller extension, the wingtips reaching their complete span and holding there for a beat before folding back. The younger chick watches from the center of the nest, instinctively keeping its distance from the turbulence its siblings' wings are generating. And then the wind gusts, not dramatically, not with any particular violence, just a clean pulse of faster air arriving from the northwest, and the elder chick's wings, already extended on the downstroke, catch it. The feet leave the nest floor. For 2 seconds, perhaps 3, the bird hangs in the air above the ledge, its wings beating in a panicked, asymmetric rhythm, its talons reaching downward for something solid that isn't there. Then it drops back onto the nest in a controlled collapse, gripping the sticks with both feet, its wings still half open, its whole body radiating something that has no precise name in the vocabulary we have for birds but that looks unmistakably like the aftermath of surprise. It stands very still for a long moment. Then it faces the wind again. That first accidental flight, if 2 or 3 seconds can be called a flight, has set something in motion that will not stop now. Over the following days, the elder chick sessions at the nest edge grow longer and more deliberate. The wing beats become more coordinated, the asymmetry smoothing out as the nervous system catches up with the muscles, as the pathways between brain and wing are reinforced through repetition into something approaching reflex. What the chick is doing, without knowing it, is rehearsing. The brain of a developing eagle undergoes a period of intense neural pruning and reinforcement during the fledging phase, the weeks surrounding first flight. Connections that are used are strengthened, connections that are not used are eliminated. The motor pathways governing flight, the precise sequencing of muscle contractions that produces a wing beat, the integration of vestibular feedback with wing position, the coordination of tail movement with body angle, are being written into the architecture of the nervous system through the act of trying. Every wingercise session, every accidental liftoff, every clumsy landing back on the nest contributes to a neural map of flight that will, within weeks, be so deeply encoded that the bird will never need to think about it consciously again. This is why the period between hatching and first flight matters so much. A bird that is prevented from wingersizing during this window, by injury, by a nest position that offers no wind exposure, by any circumstance that limits the rehearsal period, may never develop fully coordinated flight. The window is not infinite. The nervous system is plastic during this phase and rigid afterward, and what is not written in this time is very difficult to write later. The female has shifted into a new role with a definitiveness that mirrors the chick's own transition. She is rarely on the nest now for more than the time it takes to deliver food. Instead, she stations herself on a series of perches at increasing distances from the ledge, first the shelf just above, then a jutting rock 15 meters along the cliff face, then a dead pine at the canyon rim 100 meters away, and she calls from these positions. Not the thin, reedy contact call of the incubation period. Something more insistent, more directional. A call that carries information: I am here. Here is away from the nest. Away from the nest is where food is. Eagle chicks are motivated toward their first true flight not by courage or readiness but by hunger. The parents, in the days surrounding fledging, begin withholding food from the nest entirely, delivering it to nearby perches instead, or carrying it visibly past the nest without landing. The chick that wants to eat must follow. This is the mechanism. It is elegant in its simplicity and absolute in its effectiveness. Every eagle that has ever learned to fly has learned because it was hungry enough to try. The distance between the nest and the first perch to which food is delivered is not arbitrary. The female has chosen a ledge that is reachable in a single short glide, no flapping required, no complex navigation, just the extension of wings and the surrender to the air support. She has done this before, with previous season's chicks. The knowledge of how to teach is as much a part of her as the knowledge of how to hunt. On the morning of the 8th day after that first liftoff, the elder chick jumps. There is no more precise word for it. It is not a leap, not a launch, not a dive. It is a jump, forward and outward from the nest edge, into the space above the canyon, and for the first half second it is pure freefall, the wings not yet open, the body dropping with a stomach-lurching speed toward the valley floor 300 meters below. Then the wings open. Not gracefully, not with the slow, assured spread of an adult catching a thermal, but they open, and the air fills them, and the freefall becomes a glide that becomes, with 3 hard wing beats, something that is recognizably, unmistakably flight. The chick crosses the gap to the female's perch in 11 seconds, lands badly, 1 foot first, a stumble, wings flailing for balance, and immediately begins eating the prey the female has left there. The younger chick, watching from the nest, will follow within 2 days. True flight, once achieved, reveals a new world of physical demands that the nest could not prepare the fledgling for entirely. The most immediate of these is the management of speed and altitude during the approach to a landing. An eagle coming in to land must bleed off its airspeed precisely, too fast and it overshoots or impacts the perch with damaging force, too slow and it stalls, losing lift before its feet find the surface. The mechanism for slowing is the same one used at low speeds in all flight phases. The alula lifts, the wings spread to their maximum, the tail fans and drops, and the whole body tilts upward in what aeronautical engineers would call a high angle of attack, trading speed for lift in a controlled deceleration. Young fledglings crash land frequently. They overshoot perches, misjudge distances, hit branches with their wings rather than their feet. Each bad landing is itself a lesson, the vestibular system, the visual system, and the motor pathways of the wing all updating their models of how the approach should feel in the moments before touchdown. Within a few weeks, the fledglings' landings are barely distinguishable from the adults. The learning curve is steep, but it is a curve, not a wall. The cliff face itself becomes a classroom in these weeks. The fledglings learn its specific updraft patterns through direct experience, discovering that the north end of the ledge produces stronger lift than the south end, that the wind shadow behind the projecting buttress of rock 40 meters to the right creates a dead zone where a bird that wanders into it must flap hard to escape, That the long traverse along the cliff face from nest to canyon rim can be accomplished almost entirely in the ridge lift if the approach angle is right. This is local knowledge, cliff-specific and irreplaceable, and it is being accumulated flight by flight. Cliffside environments present aerodynamic challenges not found over open terrain. The interference between the smooth flow of the prevailing wind and the complex geometry of the rock face produces turbulence, not the large-scale turbulence of a storm, but small-scale, rapid fluctuations in wind speed and direction that can catch an inexperienced bird off guard. These fluctuations are particularly intense at the edges of the cliff, the top edge where the wind tears away from the rock surface, and the sides where the smooth flow wraps around projecting features. Learning to anticipate and navigate this boundary turbulence is a significant part of what separates the confident flight of an adult cliffside eagle from the tentative, error-prone flight of a juvenile. In the evenings of these first weeks of flight, both fledglings return to the nest to roost. This is typical. Fledging does not mean departure, not yet, and the nest remains a reference point, a safe harbor, a place that smells like family and food and the long security of the weeks before the sky opened up. They will return to it for weeks yet, and the parents will continue to provision them, though with decreasing frequency and at increasing distances, the radius of the food delivery expanding steadily outward as the fledglings' flight range grows. The cliff holds them still, as it has held everything: the eggs, the hatching, the first gray down and the dark emerging feathers, and now these two young birds, standing at the nest edge in the last of the evening light with their faces toward the canyon, reading the air with a fluency that is growing daily, becoming, flight by flight, the thing they were always meant to be. The stars appear above the ridge, one by one. The wind eases. The nest settles into the quiet of the high dark, and the cliff holds its breath for another night, as it has for 30 years, as it will for 30 more. August arrives on the cliff the way it always does, not with any single dramatic announcement but with a slow accumulation of small changes that add up, over days, to a different feeling in the air. The light is fractionally lower in the sky at midday. The shadows are a little longer in the late afternoon than they were a month ago. The mornings carry a coolness that July did not, a sharpness that sits in the back of the throat like the first intimation of something approaching. The thermals still rise. The ridge lift still runs along the cliff face. But the season has quietly turned its face towards something else, and everything on the cliff knows it, even if nothing can be said about it in human terms. The fledglings are barely recognizable as the gray, stumbling nestlings of 8 weeks ago. They are, in terms of physical size, essentially the size of their parents now, the skeleton fully grown, the musculature of the breast and shoulders dense and hard from weeks of wingersizing and increasingly sustained flight. What distinguishes them visually from the adults is their plumage. Where the parents were the dark brown of mature golden eagles, with the tawny golden wash across the nape and crown that gives the species its name, the juveniles are marked differently, dark brown above and below, but with crisp white patches at the base of the tail and within the wing, at the base of the primary feathers, that flash brightly in flight. These white markings are not decorative. They are signals, readable at distance by other eagles, announcing unambiguously, this bird is young, this bird is not yet a territorial competitor, this bird does not need to be driven away. Juvenile plumage in golden eagles is retained for the first year of life, replaced through a series of molts that progressively introduce more adult-type feathers over the following 3 to 4 years. Full adult plumage, the rich, uniform dark brown with the golden nape, and the loss of the white wing and tail patches, is not achieved until the bird is around 5 years old. This extended period of subadult plumage is not incidental. It serves as a social passport, allowing young birds to move through established territories, to approach carcasses and other food sources already occupied by adults, without triggering the aggressive displacement response that a bird in full adult plumage would provoke. The white patches say, in the visual language of eagles, "I am not a threat. I am still learning." And they are still learning. The 2 juveniles from this cliff have begun ranging further from the nest in their daily flights, following the contours of the canyon system northward and then east, discovering the territories and topographies that lie beyond the familiar ridge. Every new valley is a new wind system. Every new cliff face has its own updraft character, its own pattern of boundary turbulence, its own thermal triggers. The juveniles are building their map of the aerial landscape that surrounds their natal cliff, and they are doing it with the methodical, unhurried thoroughness of minds that have nothing else to do and all the time the season allows. The elder juvenile is hunting. Not successfully, not yet, not consistently, but hunting in the sense that matters, which is to say attempting it with genuine intent. It has watched its parents hunt for its entire life, first from the nest and now from the air alongside them, and it has absorbed the broad shapes of the behavior, the high soaring surveillance, the identification of a target, the fold into the stoop, the extension of the feet at the last moment. What it has not yet fully developed is the precision, the judgment of angle and speed and timing that converts a technically correct stoop into a successful strike. The gap between watching and doing is always larger than it appears from the watching side. The juvenile's first independent stoops are too shallow, or too steep, or launched from the wrong angle relative to the prey's direction of movement. Prey that the parents would have taken cleanly escapes with a casual change of direction that the juvenile cannot compensate for quickly enough. Ground squirrels reach their burrows. Rabbits jink left at the last moment. The juvenile pulls up, circles back to altitude, and tries again with the slightly recalibrated model that each attempt produces. Young eagles typically do not make their first successful unassisted kill until several weeks after fledging, and for the first year of independent life their hunting success rate is significantly lower than that of adults. Studies tracking juvenile golden eagles through their first winter have found that many lose substantial body weight during this period, the caloric deficit of inefficient hunting narrowing the margin between survival and starvation. Those that survive their first winter are, in a very direct sense, the ones that learned fastest. The parents are still providing supplemental food during these weeks, though with a frequency and reliability that continues to decline. The female will sometimes hunt alongside the juveniles, not cooperatively in the way wolves hunt together, but in parallel, covering adjacent sections of the same meadow, her presence and her technique visible to the young bird flying above her. There is evidence that juveniles whose parents hunt in their presence during this post-fledging period develop hunting competence more rapidly than those whose parents become entirely absent early. The learning is observational, continuous, and cumulative, laid on top of the instinctive hunting template the bird was born with until the two are indistinguishable. One aspect of hunting that takes particularly long to master is reading the wind for the final approach. A hunting eagle approaching prey on the ground must account for the wind's effect on its flight path, crosswind components that push it offline, headwinds that slow its approach and give the prey more time to react, tailwinds that increase speed but reduce maneuverability. Experienced adult eagles consistently approach prey from downwind when terrain allows, reducing the likelihood that their scent or the sound of their wing beats will alert the prey before the stoop is committed. Juveniles make this adjustment less reliably, and the prey escapes more often as a result. The wind, which has governed everything about this bird's life since before it hatched, continues to be teacher as much as medium. The molt has begun in both adult birds, proceeding with the quiet, systematic efficiency that characterizes everything the adults do. Flight feathers, the primaries and secondaries that form the working surface of the wing, are not shed all at once, which would leave the bird flightless and vulnerable. Instead, they are replaced in a precise, bilaterally symmetrical sequence, one or two feathers dropping from each wing simultaneously so that the aerodynamic balance of the bird is maintained throughout the process. The gaps left by shed feathers are visible in flight as small notches in the wing silhouette, and a bird's molt stage can be read at a distance by someone who knows what to look for. Each new primary feather takes approximately 6 weeks to grow to full length. The feather that replaces a shed one is slightly longer and fresher than the one it replaces. The new feather represents the bird's current nutritional status at the time of growth, and a well-fed bird in good condition grows longer, more structurally sound feathers than a bird under nutritional stress. This means that an eagle's flight feathers are, in a sense, a physical record of the past year's fortunes, a biography written in keratin, readable in the length and quality of each successive feather if you know the language. The afternoons of late August bring a new atmospheric phenomenon to the cliff that the juveniles are encountering for the first time, the thermal street. When the wind is light and the surface heating is strong and uniform, thermals do not form randomly across the landscape but organize themselves into parallel rows aligned with the prevailing wind, streets of rising air separated by corridors of descent, stretching for tens of kilometers downwind from their source. A bird that finds a thermal street and aligns itself correctly can travel enormous distances with almost no effort, moving from one thermal column to the next in long, descending glides, gaining altitude in each thermal before gliding to the next. The adults know the thermal streets of their territory intimately, which surface features generate them, which wind directions organize them, what time of day they develop and when they collapse as the surface heating fades in the late afternoon. The juveniles are discovering them now, sometimes stumbling into them accidentally and riding them in apparent bewilderment for longer than they intended before finding a way back to familiar ground. The cliff, when they return to it in the evening, sits in the same place it always has, solid and unchanging against the cooling sky, a fixed point in a world that has spent the whole day trying to teach them how large and complex and full of invisible structure it really is. The nest is quieter these days. The parents roost on the cliff above it, the juveniles on lower ledges. Nobody is in the nest itself most nights. It sits empty in the dark, full of the accumulated years of the family's life, waiting as it always waits, patient as stone. September comes in on a cold front that moves through overnight, dropping the temperature on the cliff by nearly 10 degrees between dusk and dawn. The change is not subtle. It announces itself in the quality of the morning air, sharper, drier, carrying the faint mineral smell of distant snow from the high peaks to the north, and in the behavior of everything on the cliff face. The lizards that have spent the summer on the sun-warmed south-facing rocks are gone, retreated into the crevices where they will spend the winter in a metabolic near-stillness. The insects that have been constant background noise through the long hot days are suddenly reduced to scattered individuals, the chorus replaced by a quiet that makes the wind more audible, more present. The juvenile eagles feel the cold front differently from how they felt the warmth of June. They are no longer the small, poorly insulated nestlings that needed constant parental brooding to maintain their temperature. Their contour feathers now form a layered system of remarkable thermal efficiency, the downy bases trapping a deep buffer of warmed air against the skin, the outer veins presenting a surface that rain runs off and wind cannot penetrate. In still, cold air, a healthy eagle in full juvenile plumage loses heat slowly enough that its metabolic cost of staying warm is relatively modest. It is the wind chill that demands more. The heat stripped away by moving air is significantly greater than that lost to cold alone, and on a day when the temperature drops and the wind rises together, as they have today, the birds must eat well to balance the equation. The hunting this morning is different from the relaxed, exploratory flights of late summer. There is an efficiency to it, a directedness. The elder juvenile is in the air early, working the ridge lift with more purpose than it has shown before, the cold front's northwest wind producing clean, powerful uplift along the entire cliff face. It ranges further north than it has gone before, 5 kilometers along the canyon system, then out over the broad plateau where the grassland stretches unbroken to the horizon and the wind has nothing to interrupt it. Out here, away from the cliff, the air is different again. There is no ridge lift, no mechanical uplift from rock faces. What there is, in the cold morning air over the plateau, is a phenomenon called a cold air drainage flow, the thin layer of air that has chilled overnight by contact with the ground and is now sliding slowly downslope under its own greater density, pooling in the low points of the terrain. The juvenile eagle, crossing the plateau at low altitude, feels this cold dense air beneath it as a subtle but real increase in air density. Denser air means more molecules per wing beat, means more lift per stroke, means slightly easier flight close to the surface than it would be on a warm summer afternoon. The physics of cold air are, in this small but measurable way, an advantage. Cold air drainage flows also concentrate prey. Small mammals that have been active through the night, voles, mice, the occasional rabbit moving through the long grass, are still present in the low areas where the cold air has pooled, their activity not yet suppressed by the rising light. The juvenile eagle courses low over the plateau's drainage channels, and for the first time since fledging, it hunts with something approaching the fluid confidence of an adult. Back at the cliff, the adult pair are engaged in a behavior that seems, at this time of year, almost premature. The female is on the nest, rearranging its upper layers, pulling at the outer sticks, repositioning bundles of dry grass, and this morning she has brought a green sprig of juniper and pressed it into the nest's central bowl with deliberate attention. The male, arriving shortly after, adds a stick of his own, a fresh one, pale and springy. The nest is being prepared for the following year's breeding season. This early season nest maintenance, beginning in late summer or early autumn, months before the eggs will be laid, is one of the more striking demonstrations of the temporal depth of an eagle's engagement with its home site. The pair are not responding to immediate reproductive readiness. They are maintaining and reinforcing the structure that will receive next year's eggs, acting on a schedule written not in the immediate demands of the present but in the long calendar of the cliff itself. Nest maintenance in late summer also serves a structural purpose. Sticks added before the winter will be compressed and locked into the nest's matrix by rain, snow, and freeze-thaw cycles over the coming months, becoming part of the permanent architecture by spring. The bond between the pair that makes this possible is itself worth pausing on. Golden eagles are monogamous and typically mate for life, though if one partner dies the survivor will accept a new mate. The pair bond is renewed each year through a courtship display that begins in late winter or early spring, a spectacular aerial performance in which the two birds fly together in a series of undulating dives and climbs, the male sometimes performing a sky-dancing display of repeated steep dives and upward swoops that can continue for several minutes. This display is not merely a check on the partner's fitness, it is a renewal of the bond itself, a reaffirmation conducted in the medium that defines their shared life. The juvenile's departure from the natal territory is not a single event but a gradual process of widening absence. They disappear for longer and longer periods, returning to the cliff for fewer nights, their presence becoming intermittent through September and then sporadic in October. There is no moment of farewell, no ceremony. One day they simply do not come back, and the cliff settles into the quiet of a pair without young, the two adults moving through their territory with the unhurried efficiency of birds who have provisioned their young for another year and can now redirect that energy into their own maintenance. The juveniles, wherever they have gone, are navigating by a combination of mechanisms that researchers are still working to fully understand. Eagles, like many migratory birds, possess a magnetic sense, an ability to detect the Earth's magnetic field and use it as a compass reference. The precise physical mechanism by which this works is still debated, but current evidence points to the presence of magnetite crystals in the nasal region and possibly to a chemical process in the eye involving light-sensitive molecules called cryptochromes, which may allow the bird to literally see the magnetic field as a visual overlay on its normal vision. Whether or not this visual component is part of the eagle's actual experience, the navigational capability is real. Birds displaced from familiar territory can orient correctly toward home or toward their migration goal even under overcast skies when celestial cues are unavailable. The cliff faces autumn with all its usual composure. The aspen on the canyon walls have gone gold overnight, or what looks like overnight, the cumulative effect of weeks of slow chlorophyll withdrawal suddenly visible as the color that was always there beneath the green. The river below runs lower and clearer than it has all summer, the snowmelt long spent, the water returning to its base flow. The sky is different now, the high, hazy blue of summer replaced by something deeper and more transparent, a blue that seems to go further than it did before, as if the atmosphere itself has thinned and clarified. In this colder, denser air, soaring dynamics change in ways both subtle and significant. Thermals are weaker and shorter-lived, the reduced solar heating of autumn cannot sustain the tall, powerful columns of summer. But the ridge lift along the cliff face is actually improved by the denser cold air, which carries more momentum per unit volume and deflects upward more forcefully against the rock. Eagles that know their terrain shift their soaring strategy accordingly, less thermaling, more ridge soaring, more time spent close to the cliff face where the mechanical lift is reliable rather than out over the valley where the thermals have faded. This seasonal recalibration of soaring strategy is a mark of experience. Young eagles on their first autumn are slower to make this shift, continuing to seek thermals over the valley floor long after the adults have moved their operations back to the reliable ridge. The cliff teaches, as it always has, not through instruction but through the patient, repeated presentation of conditions that reward the right response and gently penalize the wrong one. The adults roost together on the high shelf above the nest, as they have done for years. In the evening, when the ridge lift has faded and the cliff face cools and the first stars appear above the canyon rim, they sit close, not touching, in the way of birds, but close enough that the warmth each generates is available to the other, close enough that the long pair bond that holds this cliff's history together is expressed in simple proximity. The nest below them is ready, layered and solid, holding the shape of every year that has passed through it. Winter is coming. The cliff is ready. And somewhere out on the long plateau to the north, or the mountain system to the east, two young eagles with white patches on their wings are learning what the world is made of, one cold morning at a time. Winter arrives on the cliff without apology. The first snow comes in early November, not a dusting, not a tentative beginning, but a full, committed snowfall that lasts 2 days and leaves the canyon transformed. The ledges are white. The nest is white, its dark sticks visible only at the edges where the wind has scoured the snow away. The river below has narrowed to a dark thread between ice shelves that grow inward from both banks, and the aspens on the canyon walls are bare now, their pale trunks and branches making a fine gray mesh against the heavy sky. The adult pair are still here. They have not migrated. This cliff, this canyon, this particular arrangement of rock and wind and prey ground has held them through every winter they have known together, and it will hold them through this one. Not all golden eagles that nest at elevation remain through winter. Those whose territories offer insufficient prey in the cold months, particularly those in landscapes where the snowpack buries the small mammals that form the dietary foundation, will drift to lower elevations or travel south along the mountain front until the snow recedes. But this pair has a territory rich enough and a cliff sheltered enough that the calculus of winter favors staying. Staying through winter on a cliff carries its own particular demands. Chief among them is the problem of thermoregulation in conditions far more extreme than anything the summer presented. At night, when the temperature drops below -20 on the exposed canyon rim, an eagle roosting on a ledge must maintain its core body temperature at approximately 40 degrees Celsius, a differential of 60 degrees between the inside of the bird and the outside air, sustained through nothing but feathers and metabolic heat. The feather system earns its keep most completely in these conditions. The key to its winter performance is something called the countercurrent heat exchange system in the legs. An eagle's legs are largely uninsulated, they are covered in scales rather than feathers, and they extend into the cold air with every perch and every landing. Without some compensatory mechanism, the blood circulating down the legs into the feet would lose heat rapidly to the surrounding air, and the cold blood returning to the body would cool the core. The countercurrent system prevents this. The arteries carrying warm blood down to the feet run in close contact with the veins carrying cold blood back up, and heat transfers from one to the other so efficiently that the blood arriving at the feet is already substantially cooled before it reaches the extremity, reducing heat loss there, while the blood returning to the body has been pre-warmed before it re-enters the core. The feet can be allowed to operate at temperatures close to freezing, cold enough to grip a snowy perch without discomfort, while the body stays warm. On the coldest nights, the adults roost in the most sheltered positions the cliff offers, deep recesses in the rock, angles where two faces meet and break the wind, overhangs that trap a small pocket of relatively still air. They face into whatever wind remains, presenting the minimum cross-section of body surface to the moving air. They fluff their feathers to maximum volume, increasing the depth of the insulating air layer. And they stand on one leg, tucking the other against the warm belly feathers, having the surface area of exposed leg and saving a measurable quantity of heat through a night that is 16 hours long. The hunting in winter is both harder and, in certain ways, more revealing of the eagle's full capabilities. The snow has covered the small mammal burrow systems, and the surface activity of ground squirrels and voles is dramatically reduced. What the landscape offers instead are the larger ungulates, deer, elk, the occasional pronghorn, moving through the snow-floored canyon on their winter ranges. The eagles cannot take a healthy adult deer. But winter is not a season of healthy adults. It is a season of the old, the injured, the nutritionally depleted, the fawns separated from their mothers by a hard night. Eagles are acute readers of animal health and condition from altitude. A deer moving with a slight asymmetry in its gait, favoring one leg, is visible from 300 meters above as something subtly different from the smooth, energy-efficient movement of a healthy animal. A group of animals in which one individual is consistently slower to react to the eagle's shadow, slower to move away from the cliff's edge, is telling the eagle something about that individual's condition. This ability to assess prey fitness at distance, from behavior, from movement quality, from the subtle tells of an animal under physiological stress, is a component of hunting skill that takes years to develop and that distinguishes the experienced adult from the struggling juvenile as clearly as any physical attribute. There is a stillness to winter days on the cliff that the other seasons do not offer. The wind still moves, it is almost always moving here, but the thermals are absent and the thermal streets are long gone, and the only lift available is the mechanical ridge lift along the cliff face and, occasionally, the weak lee waves that develop downwind of the canyon rim when the wind is strong and steady. Lee waves are a different phenomenon from the ridge lift that runs immediately along the cliff face. They are standing waves in the atmosphere, oscillations that develop in the airflow downstream of a significant topographic obstacle, like ripples on water downstream of a rock, but oriented vertically, with the crests and troughs of the wave fixed in space even as the air moves through them. The rising portions of lee waves can carry a soaring bird to extraordinary altitudes, far higher than any thermal, but they are unpredictable and can collapse without warning, and they demand a level of meteorological literacy that only experienced birds possess. The adults, on the rare clear winter days when a strong northwest wind generates good lee waves over the canyon rim, will sometimes climb into them, spiraling upward with deliberate intent through the smooth, powerful lift until the canyon below is a narrow line and the horizon has expanded to take in the entire mountain system in a single view. Up here, in the cold and the silence above the weather, there is something about the quality of the eagle's flight that is different from the purposeful efficiency of the hunting day. The wings are barely moving. The bird is simply held, in the cold blue air, at the top of the world. December deepens, and the light continues its retreat. The days are barely 8 hours long now at this latitude, and the sun traces a low, southern arc that barely clears the canyon rim before beginning its descent. For much of the day, the cliff face is in shadow, the direct sunlight that warms the rock and the birds reaching only the very highest ledges for a few hours around midday. The adults concentrate their activity in this narrow window of warmth, hunting in the mid-morning and early afternoon when the light is best and the prey animals are most active, roosting through the long dark hours in the sheltered positions they have used for years. The pair bond holds through winter in a quiet, undemonstrative way. The two birds move through their territory on parallel tracks, occasionally converging at a kill, where there is no competition between them, no displacement of one by the other, just two large birds eating in close proximity with the ease of long familiarity. They communicate through a repertoire of calls that researchers have cataloged into at least a dozen distinct vocalizations, each associated with a specific context, contact calls that maintain awareness of each other's position across the territory, alarm calls that communicate the presence of a specific category of threat, food calls that signal a successful hunt, the specific call given during nest approach that signals arrival with prey. This vocal repertoire, while modest compared to the complex songs of passerine birds, is precise, consistent, and sufficient for the coordination of a shared life across a large and complex landscape. January brings the first hint of the turn. It is not visible in the temperature, which remains brutal, nor in the snowpack, which is at its deepest. It is visible only in the light, the days a few minutes longer than they were at solstice, the sun's arc fractionally higher, the quality of the afternoon light on the south-facing cliff face carrying a warmth that December's light did not quite manage. The female notices it first, or notices it most demonstrably. She has been spending more time on and near the nest in the past week, standing on its edge, looking into it, occasionally rearranging a stick that needs no rearranging. The reproductive system of a bird is not continuously active. It grows and shrinks on an annual cycle driven by photoperiod, the changing ratio of daylight to darkness across the year. As the days lengthen past the winter solstice, the increasing light exposure triggers hormonal cascades through the hypothalamus and pituitary gland that cause the gonads to grow from their winter dormant minimum, a fraction of their breeding season size, back to full reproductive readiness. This process takes weeks, and it is already underway. The cliff does not know that spring is coming. But the female's body does, and her body is older than any particular spring, tuned to the turning of the light over more cycles than we can count. The nest waits. The cliff waits. The long, patient machinery of another year is already running. February light is a different thing from December light. It carries intention. It arrives at a lower angle still, raking across the cliff face in long horizontal bands that illuminate every texture of the rock, every crack, every mineral stain, every ledge where lichen has been growing since before any of us were born, and the warmth it brings is real, measurable, felt by every living thing on the canyon wall. The snow is still deep on the canyon floor. The river is still locked at its edges. But the cliff itself, south-facing and stone-dark, is absorbing the February sun with the quiet eagerness of something that has been waiting a long time. The female is on the nest every morning now. Not incubating, there are no eggs yet, but present, arranging, tending, adding. The male arrives each day with fresh material, green juniper sprigs, pale strands of dried grass from the meadow, occasionally a strip of shed animal fur that he has found caught on a thorn or a fence wire and carried back with the same care he once brought prey for the chicks. The nest is being made new again from the inside out, its central bowl rebuilt and relined, its outer walls reinforced against another year of wind and weather and the weight of the family it will hold. This annual reconstruction is not purely practical. It is also communicative, a physical expression of the pair's commitment to the site and to each other, a shared project that reinforces the bond through the coordinated activity of building. Pairs that invest more heavily in nest maintenance in the weeks before laying tend to show higher breeding success, not only because the nest itself is in better structural condition but because the process of building together appears to synchronize the reproductive readiness of the two birds, aligning their hormonal cycles through close proximity and shared behavior. The courtship flights begin in earnest in the second week of February. What starts as a shared patrol of the territory, the two birds moving together along the ridge in a loose formation, their wing beats occasionally synchronizing in a way that looks almost choreographed, escalates within days into the full sky dance that this canyon has witnessed for 3 decades. The male climbs high above the cliff on the morning ridge lift, reaching an altitude from which the nest ledge below him looks small and impossibly far down, and then he folds and stoops, not at prey, not at anything material, but at the sky itself, at the sheer exhilarating fact of speed and height and the air rushing past every feather. He pulls up at the bottom of the dive with a force that compresses his body against his own wings, and climbs again, and stoops again, the undulating wave of the display repeating 8, 10, 12 times before he levels out and glides back to where the female is watching. Feathers at the extreme loading of a pull-out from a steep dive are under stresses they encounter at no other time. The primary feathers at the wingtip, already the most mechanically demanding location on the wing during normal flight, must withstand forces that could, in a feather weakened by wear or nutritional deficit, cause a structural failure, a phenomenon called feather breakage, which produces a gap in the wing that degrades aerodynamic performance until the next molt replaces the damaged feather. This is one reason why the condition of the molt matters so much. A bird that has grown strong, well-nourished feathers through the autumn and winter can perform the courtship display without risk, while a bird in poor feather condition is limited in what it can safely attempt. The female lays her first egg in the 3rd week of February. It arrives in the early morning, as eggs typically do in birds, the laying process triggered by hormonal signals and timed by the circadian system to the early hours when the bird has been roosting quietly and the egg has had the overnight period to complete its final development in the lower oviduct. She settles over it immediately, and the long vigil of incubation, familiar now, the same vigil that opened this story, begins again. The egg itself is a marvel of biological engineering that deserves more attention than it typically receives. The shell is not simply a calcium casing. It is a precisely structured composite material, with an outer layer of calcite crystals deposited in a specific orientation that maximizes strength while minimizing weight, a middle layer of columns that distribute mechanical stress, and an inner membrane that regulates the movement of gases and water vapor. The shell is permeated by thousands of microscopic pores, around 7,000 in a typical eagle egg, through which the developing embryo breathes, exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide with the outside air. The pore density is not uniform, it is calibrated to the expected humidity of the nest environment, with eggs laid in drier climates having fewer, larger pores than those laid in humid environments, ensuring that the embryo neither desiccates nor drowns in its own metabolic water. A second egg follows the first by 3 to 4 days, as it did the year before and the year before that. The incubation of both is shared between the pair, though the female takes the larger share of the night shifts and the male the larger share of the midday hours when the sun warms the cliff and the need for active brooding is reduced. Together they maintain the eggs at the precise temperature the embryos require, reading the thermal state of the clutch through the brood patch with a sensitivity that no human-built instrument can match at this scale, feeling the difference between an egg that is correctly warm and one that has cooled by even a fraction of a degree, and responding with a small adjustment of posture that corrects the deficit before it becomes a problem. The incubation period for golden eagles is approximately 41 to 45 days, longer than most people expect, longer than many other large birds. This extended incubation produces a chick that is relatively well developed at hatching compared to the young of shorter incubation species, not capable of independent thermoregulation or feeding, but neurologically more advanced, its sensory systems more complete, its capacity for rapid learning already engaged. The extra time in the egg is an investment that pays returns across the entire subsequent development of the bird. While the eggs incubate, the canyon below is waking up. The ice shelves on the river are retreating daily. The first ground squirrels have emerged from their winter burrows, blinking in the thin February light, and the meadow, still flattened and brown from the weight of the snowpack, is beginning to show the first green at the bases of the grasses where the meltwater has softened the soil. The prey base that will sustain the nest through the coming months is reconstituting itself, and the male is out hunting every clear day, rebuilding the fat reserves that the winter has drawn down and banking energy against the heavy demands that will arrive when the eggs hatch. The territory he hunts is not randomly defined. Golden eagle territories are shaped by a combination of prey availability, topography, and the locations of neighboring pairs, and they are defended through a combination of direct aerial confrontation, rare, costly, and reserved for genuine incursions, and a continuous advertisement of presence through flight. An eagle that soars visibly along the boundaries of its territory, high enough to be seen from a great distance, is performing a territorial display as real and effective as any physical confrontation. The simple fact of being seen, of being a large, dark, unmistakable shape against the sky at the boundary of one's range, is sufficient in most cases to communicate occupancy to any rival considering the territory. March arrives, and with it the full momentum of spring. The cliff is noisy now, ravens nesting lower down on the same face, their deep, liquid calls echoing up from the canyon walls, the first swallows back from the south, threading through the updrafts with an aerial dexterity that makes even the eagles look ponderous by comparison, the meadow full of returning songbirds whose names and voices fill the warm afternoons. The world has come back, as it always comes back, and the cliff is at the center of it, the fixed point around which the whole living system of the canyon turns. Beneath the female, the eggs are 3 weeks into their incubation. The embryos within them are growing daily, their hearts beating, their bones forming, their feather follicles laying down the first infrastructure of the plumage that will eventually carry them into the sky. They do not know the cliff, not yet. They do not know the wind or the ridge lift or the long geometry of the canyon system that their parents have mapped across years of flight. They do not know the weight of a thermal under a broad wing, or the clean shock of cold air at altitude, or the way the light looks on the rock face in the last minutes before dark. But they will. They are already becoming the birds that will know all of these things, cell by cell and day by day, in the warm dark of the shell, on the ledge that has held 30 years of this family's life, on the cliff that holds everything, the wind, the nest, the eggs, the endless patient turning of the seasons, as it has always held it, as it will always hold it, long after the last of us has stopped watching and the canyon has returned to its own long, unhurried conversation with the sky. The nest is ready. The eggs are warm. The wind is rising off the cliff face into the blue March morning, carrying everything upward, as it always has, as it always will.